Age of Sigmar story phase. Grab your hammer so we can clear a path through the chaos and forge our own narratives in the Age of Sigmar. Your allies through the Gnarlwoods this episode are...
Josh, we are going to blow your minds with some cosmic lore, man, and gnarly wood.
Yeah, we are.
This is Eric, and when Honorio Ventalix first told me about the trees that uprooted themselves to stalk their prey, I thought his claims were Oaklandish.
I'm Aaron, and the gnarl oaks bite when you sleep at night, deep in the heart of Ghur. And in this episode, we cover the lore of Warcry, Heart of Ghur. Whether you've got bullhorns or swamp stilts, the ravening ruin calls to all, and we're here to distill whatever lore we can from the newest expansion of Warcry. Hey, how are you guys doing tonight, fellow bloated ones?
Oh, I'm feeling saturated.
I just had dinner and I'm full. Also, your pun would have worked ending with Talaxis as well.
Deep in the... Oh, no.
Talaxis.
Deep in the heart of Talaxis. So is it worth changing? I don't know.
Yeah, just go do it again. No. Do it again. Just do it again.
Deep in the... Anyways, okay. Solid. I'm doing better. In fact, both worse and better at the same time, having heard that. Yeah.
It's a journey.
Yeah, so guys... if eagle-eared listeners, that's not the phrase, may notice that we have a returning star of I was going to say screen and stage, but really just podcast period. In this particular podcast is that Eric is here chatting lore with us. How fun is that?
It's been a couple of years since I've been on the episode on the Mortal Realms story phase. I'm glad to be back talking Warcry.
We're glad to have you. And so, in my life, Eric never really left, but it's been a stretch for the sole listeners of the story phase for sure.
Warcry as well. Yeah.
Oh, have you not been on one yet?
He has been back, but it was a long break for Warcry.
Yeah.
Yeah. True. I was definitely listening to those episodes.
I've still been talking, though, in real life.
Just no one's listening.
Yeah.
The void.
Right on. We have a great story phase. We're going to be talking about Warcry, Heart of Ghur, and it's going to be fantastic, and everybody's going to love it. But before we get to that, let's start the way we always do, and that let's talk about what folks have been up to in the hobby. And given that Eric's out of practice, I'm going to ask you first, Josh. What have you been hobbying on that you want to tell the fine listeners about?
I have been devouring all the most recent Warcry knowledge possible. Definitely that. I have been working, in the meantime, I've been working on a Wendigo themed Beasts of Chaos warband for the anticipation of Ghur. So I've got my leader built, and I've been getting models to prepare the rest of the warband. So that's ongoing. I'm also assembling another warband, which remains secret at this point in time.
Ooh, secretive. I love it. All right. So, Eric, that's how you do it. You talk about the things that you've been hobbying on recently. And so I don't know if you've been hobbying lately, but if you have, I'd love to hear about it.
Let's see. So I have not been modeling. If I've talked a little bit about on the Warcry episodes, for those who haven't been on there, I have updated my blog on themortalrealms.com a bit over the last couple of months. So kind of just trying to document the units that I have for the different warbands, etc., and having fun doing that. I've done a little bit of 3D printing, got into that earlier this year. And so my biggest limiter is the computer I use for it is sluggish. So I don't get to work on the 3D side of it as much as I want to. But trying to put together some 3D prints for Warcry tables and for some events in the future. And then recently got to play some Soulbound with my buds here at home in person. So I had a little 12-hour sesh.
A quick flash in the pan session.
Yeah, just real quick. It was awesome. It was good stories, good characters. Man, just num. That's also a spoiler for my character.
It was awesome.
So it was a lot of fun, and I hope we get to do it again sometime in the next year. But yeah, I've been doing a little hobby, and then yes, reading up on on the new Warcry stuff that's out for pre-order, and enjoying it. Really excited for this season.
Awesome. All of those things definitively qualify as hobby in my book. And
Thank goodness. Whew.
Yeah, for those interested, we did in fact record the Soulbound session that we ran, all 12 hours of it, and there will be a point in the future where that gets released. Will I make any promises as to when that will be? Absolutely not. I would never do that. But one day
in the future,
one day in the future, unhailed, uncalled for, you may get a glimpse of what we did.
If enough of you bug him on Twitter or the Discord and say, "Hey, where is that?" If there's a certain number at which you get it done, right?
Sure. I mean, that's absolutely true. I don't know what that astronomically high number must be, but it exists. Everybody's got a number, and I've got one too.
So get your friends together. Pull together a campaign, hire a Russian bot, and ask Aaron to edit that Soulbound.
You got there. You got there eventually. Perfect.
Nice.
And then as far as hobby goes on myself, guys, I finally finished assembling all my Daughters of Cain. What a glorious day. Well, thank you.
I saw those pictures. Very nice.
Yeah. So they are still obviously in their gray plastic form, but I even went out and bought them their own little plastic tub tote box thing, perfectly sized for the number of models that I had. I affectionately placed them in that box. I looked at it from all angles just to get a glimpse of the different perspectives, the best perspective perhaps. Yeah, exactly. Then I took that box and I put it on the highest shelf I have, completely out of reach, out of sight and out of mind, and moving on to the next thing. So then I've started assembling some more of my Sylvaneth stuff.
What's
the Lady
your
of
next
Vines, Lady of Vines specifically. So I'll finish up what was in the what's it called? Echoes of Doom box, and that too will go in. Will bolster the Sylvanex box that I've already got running. So that's my foreseeable future. Probably for the next 8-10 months is probably how long that will take me. But we'll get there. All right. Any other things that folks have been working on that they want to chat about?
No, not a one.
Because we're getting very close. We're getting so close to that story phase. Dear listeners, hang on for just a little bit longer, because real quick, I want to sneak in some plugs for the Mortal Realms here before we go too far. So let me remind you. I know you all know this, but I'm going to remind you. You can find more episodes of this podcast and all of our other Mortal Realms shows at themortalrealms.com. You can email us your feedback, any and all feedback, good feedback to me, bad feedback to everybody else, at mortalrealms@gmail.com. Send us an email. We love getting emails. We get so excited.
Dear Aaron, please edit the Soulbound podcast.
we just set you up with a template, listener. It's just right there. It's we served it up right for you. You can also find our Patreon at patreon.com/themortalrealms or themortalrealms.com/Patreon to support the show. And in doing so, you can get early access to episodes of this show, The Story Phase, and then also get access to semi-exclusive content like the Pocket Realms, which are short story phases hosted by Davy and myself. And so that's where most Pocket Realms go to live and spend their days. So if you want to get more Pocket Realms, which are those short story phases, that's where you're going to want to be. You want to be on the Patreon. And if it turns out that you can't, or just flat out don't want to pitch in monetarily, which is totally fine. Yeah, just obstinately won't do it, which is A-okay. Then head on over to your podcast service of choice and give us a review, which would be super helpful because I think it helps with discoverability, or that's what the internet tells me anyways. I guess I don't know for sure. Or if you don't even want to do that, which seems like a lot of work, I hear you. You could just go ahead and tell a friend about the Mortal Realms, and they'll probably thank you. Or you maybe make a lifelong enemy. It's like a crapshoot. I don't know how that's going to work. I make no promises.
That's something that'll last a lifetime as well. So
right, it could. Yeah.
We're all about longevity on the Mortal Realms. All right, that's all I had to get out of the way. Sorry about that.
One more bit of legalese. Thank you, Games Workshop, for giving us a review copy of The Heart of Ghur so that we can put this podcast together and share it with other people.
Absolutely good call, because I absolutely forgot to bring it up at the last episode, probably the episode before that, maybe the episode before that one too. So good job, Josh. I'm glad you're here. And so with that, what a great segue into our story phase. normally the story phase blurb in blue is read by Paul. Does anyone here want to read it, or should I just do it?
I could do it.
Yep.
Yeah, please do.
Eric is the man.
All right. Crack the neck. I'm going to do it in the voice of Spitzel. In the story phase, we delve into the stories, characters, creatures, and environments of the 9 realms.
Oh no, Paul. Oh gosh, your job's on notice.
Wow.
That was delightful. So, hey, Eric, what voice were we hearing right there, might I ask?
Well, that was the voice of my Soulbound character, Spitzel, the man-eater / firebelly. Yeah, he likes to hunt himself some endless spells.
Yep. That's part of the spell gobbess.
The endless spell goblins. Yeah.
Founding member.
Yeah, and so shall we all. All right, so we're here in the story phase. We're going to talk about the Heart of Ghur, which is the box set for Warcry. So basically, it's not only the newest, expansion to Warcry, but it's more than that. It's also a hearkening or a harbinger of a new edition of Warcry as well. And so with that, we expect that there are going to be all sorts of juicy stories and lore in there, and we are going to unpack it here. But before we do, I think it's probably worth trying to catch, I guess, the listeners up, but in some ways, maybe even catching Eric up on what has happened thus far in the story that maybe informs what's going to be going on in this book. And to that end, I'm going to right out the gate, coming in hot, coming in fast, with a listener question who touches on a very thing, that very theme, I guess. And so I'm losing my momentum here, but I do want to bring up, hey, listeners, if you want to ask a question here on the show, and if you want to get right out of the gate, have me read your name before most people have stopped listening to the episode, here's what you got to do. Is you got to hang out in the Discord server. You're going to hang out in there every day. You're going to hang out there all day. And you're going to wait for me to ask, hey, does anybody have any questions that they want us to bring up on our show, on our podcast, The Mortal Realms? And then you think, yes, I do. And you'll post your question, and I will read them, and I will copy and paste them into our show notes here, and then I will bring them up on the story phase, which is what I'm doing right now for our friend Tyrio. And they ask, how has Broken Realms shaped the journey to the now? Which Tyrell knows, and we know, and you will know soon, that yes, a lot of the most recent stuff as it relates to the story of the Mortal Realms and also Warcry stems from the things that have occurred in Broken Realms and the events that followed. And so I ask you guys, what's happened recently in the story that might in some way contribute to the story? What's going on in this box set? Josh, do you have any ideas?
I do. So the story that's presented in these books for the Heart of Ghur, it talks about we'll get into more detail, but it talks about the ship crash landing in Ghur hundreds of years ago. So the Gnarlwood and everything else, the existence of this area has been here for quite a while. However, the stories of the Broken Realms have shaped the with Alariel's rite of magic and the culmination of life magic pursuing, kind of expanding throughout the realms has invigorated the spirit of Ghur, and some of those effects have kind of pushed people towards this particular area, and also encouraging other factions to enter Thondia and Ghur itself, where all the action has taken place.
Yeah, absolutely. Eric, I don't know how closely you've been following the latest events in Age of Sigmar in the Mortal Realms.
I've tried to I've listened to a lot of this great podcast called The Mortal Realms, and try to keep up with the different, like, Kragnos and Alariel. I don't think I've gotten to this Alariel rite of life yet. So I'm here. Tell me a little. Give me the cliff notes of it.
Sure. To which Josh's point is that so you were around when we were talking about the Necroquake and sort of that time where Nagash was on ascendant.
Soul Wars.
Yeah, exactly. So Teclis got fed up with that at some point, and they mano a mano 1v1'd each other, and Teclis got the upper hand. And in some ways, he not quite banished Nagash, but might as well have, thus defeating him and really ending that time of death. Alariel steps in. She says, all right, well, what's the opposite of death? It's going to be life. The realms are a mess, and I'm going to do something about it. And so she creates this big, all-encompassing, life-themed magical wave. In some ways, the antithesis of that necro quake, negating the death magic that had permeating the realms. But lo and behold, surprise, surprise, that also had unintended consequences, and it invigorated and reawoken a lot of latent things across the realms. The realm of Ghur being one of them, and it was already a wild and tumultuous place, but it has only been, more fervently awoken. And we're seeing a lot of that play out in this Age of Sigmar 3.0 timeframe, where a lot of the camera is being focused in Ghur these days, which I think is one of the reasons why this box set is also taking place there as well.
So that makes sense too. I think I picked up maybe at Kragnos. I probably didn't go back far enough to catch the Rite of Life, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and it's actually the Rite of Life is what woke Kragnos up as well. So that is maybe a driving factor to some of that. We're also seeing, and it's less related to Lariel specifically, but we are seeing the outsets of these Dawnbringer Crusades, which are crusades headed up by the cities of Sigmar, or followers of Sigmar at the very least, alongside Stormcast and other Azerian-aligned forces, where they are going out into the realms and founding more beachheads. They're being more proactive and expansionary in the realms, which is, in some ways, a change of pace. But then again, in some ways, it's not a change of pace because we were already founding cities for years and years before that. But
yeah, this is more like trying to conquer the frontier sort of feel.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. That's a good way to put it. And I bring that up because that actually, in some ways, is a driving factor to the story that we're telling in this box as well. Is there any other historical context that we want to bring up? So again, sort of casting our eyes backwards in time before we reach this book at all?
I don't think so.
Okay, because I'm gonna tie this up with a bow with a couple other listener questions that are all on the same theme, of course. So a patron of the show, Klaus M.A., patron and friend of the show, I would say. But they ask, is there an overarching tie between Broken Realms, the 3.0, the Season of Warthandia, Warcry? So that's a bunch of different products that have come out in a relatively short succession. And by that, I mean over the course of a couple of years. They continue. I believe we saw hints of the tie-in of the games in Broken Realms Marathi, but I don't think it was built upon. So what he's saying is that there was connections between Broken Realms and other Warcry products. Is there any direct connection between those stories in this book? That's one part of the question. But then Mealhern, also a listener, asked the question, are there any links to the Season of Warthandia or I believe he's talking about the GHB here. So basically they're asking, are there direct tie-ins between those stories and what we're seeing in this book? And if so, ought we talk about them? But I don't know that there's as direct tie-ins as maybe what they're alluding to here.
I agree with you. Yeah, I think there's no direct tie-in. There are certainly consequences of those other stories which have impacted. For example, there are parts of the story that talk about individuals who've had, curses of changing into beasts and things like that, which is part of the war of the Gon in Thandia, where the rising of the spirit of Ghur is causing this supernatural change of people into beasts. And, so they do reference that in the book in terms of, some of the areas are dealing with, the Dawnbreaker Crusades are dealing with these rise of people changing into beasts. It also talks about the people influx into this region because of the rise of primal magic and the energy, the Wa and the denizens of the realm that are going out and fighting more. But again, I don't think there's any direct correlation between the story and what's going on in this particular place.
So yeah, I think there's loose ties or thin ties, like with each of the factions and how they're approaching it. Why death is here ties to the state of Nagash, right?
Right.
So I think there's definitely ties, but it's not the main theme. So I think we're kind of shifting to look at this, some of the things that exist here and the secrets behind it. And I think that gives some other things time to shine. I think or maybe the other stuff that we've been hearing to cool off a little bit and kind of seed for a bit. And now we're kind of moving to a new idea.
I do think that, with the era of beasts and the rise of Dawnbringer Crusades, as you mentioned before, Aaron, that does kind of tie into this, because it's one of the reasons that this whole area has exploded in interest, I think.
Absolutely, and it would be a good segue if I didn't want to sneak in one more question from Tyrell, who just brings up, it's related, but they want to know, did we have any hints that we were coming here? Here being in Ghur and in the Gnarlwood. Was there any indication, ahead of time that we could have gleaned that this is where we were going to end up? Do you guys have any thoughts about that?
Personally, I don't think we had any hints that Warcry would move here. It certainly felt like Age of Sigmar was having a focus in Thondia with, the battles of Kragnos and Excelsis, and then they came out with the Thondia book, The Seasons of War Thondia. So it certainly felt like, okay, we're going to focus on Thondia for a while for Age of Sigmar. But I don't think I didn't see any hint that Warcry would be moving to this particular area, although we had already done so in some of the games that we'd put together.
Yeah, I think my read or hope had been that, like we're working ourselves around the Trivial Pursuit pie of the 8 points.
Yeah, me too.
Like that we'd gotten, the first, piece of the pie, and that we were just going to kind of go around and see other pieces of it. So I think it was really unexpected for us that we were going to be moving out of the 8 points for Warcry, but I'm excited to see what it opens up. And from a rules standpoint, there's a really clever thing of saying, hey, when you're in this place, here are some rules sets, and when you're in a new place, we can change that up a bit and play things a little differently. So I think that's kind of cool.
I think it's also interesting because in Broken Realms, Morathi, it kind of plays off of some of the events that we had in Warcry. So the fact that Warcry has moved to the same location as the rest of Age of Sigmar is kind of nice, that we're tying the story all together in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you guys have you've answered completely the way I would have answered, so I have nothing to add. That's exactly what I would have said. So,
Hive mind, go.
Yeah, you done good. And so instead of repeating what you just said, I'm just going to carry on. So, Josh, you had a great segue. You brought up the Dawnbringer Crusades, and we talked about why it's important to this story. But might I ask, why? Why are the Dawnbringer Crusades to what we're seeing here?
Definitely. So, as you had mentioned, the Dawnbringer Crusades are kind of like these expeditionary forces that have decided to try and go out and establish a new outpost in the realms, which is currently so overwhelmed with chaos and unknown areas that the order, the alliances of orders is trying to continue to spread their influence. So one such Dawnbringer crusade was led by Anario von Telex. And while they had a series of unfortunate events, they did eventually make their way to the center of the Gnarlwood and discovered Talaxis. He was the only one to escape, but he did escape with a variety of unique artifacts. And he began telling the legend of Talaxis. And this spread amongst anybody that was, associated with the Free Cities, and also Nagash was listening through souls, the people who died searching for these places, and chaos worshippers heard about it. And so this legend of Talaxis just continued to spread throughout the realms, where people realized this is a really interesting place. We should go check out what is here.
For sure. And so now we've got two different, a couple, but two different, to me, I guess, areas or components to this region that are definitely worth talking about. We've got Talaxis, which is this crash ship that we're going to talk about. And then we've also got the Gnarlwood, which surrounds it, right? So the Gnarlwood is the woods, and then Talaxis is the ruins in the center of it. So let's go on outward in. So let's start with the Gnarlwood and talk about what we're seeing there. And so to that end, another listener questions. We're chock full of them today, guys. Patron of the show, Dog Tired, they ask, what is the ecosystem of this Gnarlwood? What is it really like? Is it a temperate forest? Is it a jungle? A mixture? And also, furthermore, what sets the Gnarlwood apart as being different from the surrounding countryside? And so what a great place to start. Let's literally talk about what this place is made of or what it looks like. And so we've got our woods. You've got a forest. That can't be that scary, right? They're a walk in the woods. It's peaceful. It's serene. There's nothing to be afraid of at all. just kidding. This is a woods in Ghur. What do you guys know about the gnarlwood that you want to share with the listeners?
So the ecosystem of the gnarlwood is kind of left a little bit in the air. It talks about that the weather is changes quite a bit, that there tend to be some storms around the ruin itself, but it can be very warm, and then you can get sudden downpours, which the rain is so difficult that it can knock you unconscious, at certain points in time. So it's hard to tell whether it's more jungle or not, because it really just talks about that this particular region is, we'll say, inhabited by gnarl oaks extensively. And these particular trees are carnivorous, and so they will consume their prey. But the gnarl wood itself is also inhabited by a huge variety of predatory plants and animals. And as I went through this book in the Rotten Ruin book, I came up with 22 specific named creatures and or parasites, plants, or whatever else that potentially live in this region. And I'm sure there's more.
Just real quick, I just wanted to add to what you were saying about the ecosystem or whatever, and we'll get into it in a minute. But the reason why the gnarlwood is here is because it's hard to say without. It was created based off of the jungles that the Seraphon inhabit, and only to a triple, quadruple to the 10th degree out of control kind of growth. So the feeling I got was a lot of like Amazonian, but with a lot of, but also like oaks are much more like northern hemispheric trees. So it's kind of this. It's definitely a mix, and like I think you could have any form of jungle you might want in here, from solid ground with tall trees to like very murky rivers, waters, all that kind of stuff, marshes, etc.
The mixture of like them talking about the weather and like the rain and like the heavy rains, and then also talking about like the oppressive heat that comes through here as well, really gave me a jungle vibe. But then to your point, Eric, it's like a jungle, but also is full of oaks, which is a juxtaposition there a little bit. Yeah. Though, of course, they could just be.
They talk about the canopy too, which is you definitely talk about canopies and creatures and canopies in a jungle setting.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Josh, you'd mentioned your long list of beasts.
Bestiary.
Yeah, I want to know what some of your favorites were.
Wow. We've got a huge list here.
Well, I'll tell you what. I'm sorry. Yeah, before I go, not only do I want to know, Tyrael wants to know as well, or to maybe put it a different way. They ask, what non-creatures can we expect from the Heart of Ghur? I'm sorry, Tyrael. There's too many. It's mostly creatures that we can expect from Heart of Ghur. So
exactly.
That's what we're going to.
Well, and it's Ghur. Like, isn't even the dirt a creature in Ghur?
Sure, yeah. And
in a lot of ways, right?
The rain was a creature, which is ridiculous. But yeah,
each raindrop has teeth.
Yeah, what's worse?
I want to know what the winged arachnids look like. That's just like Paul's alley. I can imagine.
Oh, I bet.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, do you want to give us first just a read through the list of their names, and then we can pick out a few to kind of unpack a little bit more?
I can do that. It's a long list, but like I said, okay. So we'll start with Thornspine leonox. It's a lion type creature. Vorskalid has an acidic tongue. Gnarlox, of course, as you would expect. Sawtooth ratascus, 6-legged cats. Ratascus. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Blood wasps, shovelhorn rhinoxen, impaler mantids, slimy slug bowls, winged arachnids, giant centipedes, Ghurish flaghorns, the blood grook, an avian killer that lives in the canopy, giant gut borer worms, which the parasite, quite disgusting, flenser wolves, carax, flocks of scythe-tongued shriekers, cardosaurs, as you might expect, terrapins, which are kind of like crocodiles, alligators, acid-spitting flowers, of course, the mouth opening in the ground, Nice. Throttling lianas, and another variety of parasites. Quite a few different things here.
Oh man,
Somebody just had a field day just mashing words together.
Right. You know, this is like a vacation paradise for death.
I want to know how long that list took for them to come up with. Was it something they rattled off in like 4 minutes, or was it like there's no wrong answers, just throw words at a dartboard?
You just keep making stuff up, I think. You know,
I guess.
Right. There's no wrong answer here.
Is that a list they worked on over the course of like a week? I'm not sure.
I mean, gnarl oaks and garnox are all the same letters, just rearranged. So maybe they had one of those boards where they just see here's a phrase. See how many different ways we can rearrange it to animals.
My favorite on that list, and by favorite I mean demonstrably least favorite, is the gut borer worms, because those are these like minute parasites that live in water, and like those parasites exist in the real world. I understand that, but when you drink it, like it grows at an alarming speed and then literally bursts out of your belly in a spray of blood and viscera.
Yeah, totally an alien reference.
Yeah. Oh, true. Yeah.
So what is what's the large version of the gut borer worm then? Does it become something else?
I'm not positive. Maybe it's one of the worms from Dune.
Right.
This is how they start.
What were the
living spells?
Oh, what are the wolves? The Vespler?
Yeah, they just call them Flenser wolves. You know, so there's no other.
Flenser is a cool name.
Yeah. So obviously, it's like flaying you apart somehow. Is what it sounds like, tearing your skin from your body somehow.
Yeah, I think there's a D&D wolf that's 2-dimensional. Like if you can only see it from the side, but when you see it head on, you can't see it at all, and it'll just slice right through you. That's
nice.
All right. So suffice it to say, there is quite the flora and fauna here at in the Gnarlwood.
But people live here too.
Yeah, definitely.
So
live and die, and also define people, I suppose. But there are a number of places that they call out in the Gnarlwood. And to that end, another question from Dog Tired, patron of the show. Thank you very much, Dog Tired. They ask, what do we know about the cities in Gnarlwood? Are there elven tree cities or fire slayer mold lodges? And to that, I would say not exactly, but there are different.
I think the only real city they talk about is the Canopy of Starlight. There's a couple camps or encampments, which existed, and I think certainly the quests in some of the books talk about a particular city that you can do a campaign to try to take down. But in terms of the main lore, they talk about the Canopy of Starlight being in the center of the Gnarlwood, around some of the segments of the ruin, the Eye of Chotek. It has some remnant magic power that protects it from the creatures around the area and the weather. And so they built a treetop settlement there. And it's the only spot you can see the sky, which is why they call it the Canopy of Starlight. There are certain other areas, but I don't know if there's so much of settlements in those particular areas.
And I wonder with that, because they specifically mentioned the only place you can see Azir, I wonder if the Gnarlwood would be difficult for Stormcast to lightning bolt out of. Between that and maybe the Cursed Skies, very, very, very possibly. I think the Cursed Skies have spread to Ghur to some degree, so that would definitely, between the two of those things, would definitely complicate the transition for sure. There's also that Camp Fortune, which, although is not big, but it at one point was served as a camp for that Dawnbringer Crusade that had made its way into the Gnarlwood, but I do believe at this point it is abandoned and trashed, and there's just signs that folks had been here, but I don't believe anyone's
there are journals, and I think there was a second expedition. Yeah, the first expedition found the Talaxis, and then after going back and spreading the word, they tried to do a second expedition, got off course, and it's in ruins now. So, whoops.
Shucks. Better luck next time.
I gotta say that in this section of the book, they point out that the Stormcast had come along and found some of the journals from the initial discoverer of Talaxis, and then that it seemed like he was going mad. And it was mainly because he was trying to find a way out, but because the gnarl oaks continued to move around, that none of the paths remained, and they were always changing. And I just loved that, especially since they had it throughout the book. They had these little phrases occasionally on some of the pages, and it was just great. It kind of tied it all together. One of them was like, "All living creatures must sleep." It was like, because the Gnarlooks, attack the mortals when they're all sleeping. It was like, creepy forest, the creepy forest.
And to be real clear, I think the trees in the Heart of Ghur box set are Gnarlooks.
I believe so, yeah.
Yes.
I think they might be dead ones because they talk about, sometimes the dead ones you can go ahead and build around, etc. But you can see that like each one of them is like stomped and killed something, and there's skulls underneath them and stuff. So I think those are dead gnarl oaks. Maybe they're still alive.
They do talk about gnarl oaks. They feast for a while. So once they've had something to eat, they're kind of dormant for a little bit. So it could be that they've eaten recently. But another piece of the lore also says that a lot of them have started faking being dead, so that foresters will come along to try to cut them down, and then they get attacked. It was like a recent development, apparently. It was like, oh my God, they're learning. That's not good.
Ogre. Incorrigible scamp. Were there any other highlighted places in the Gnarlwood that you folks wanted to chat about or bring up?
I mean, I love that they say that one of the factions that thrives here are the ogres because there's nothing they can't eat, and so it's not necessarily a problem for them to live there, but they keep digging these holes to serve their kind of hungry master. But then the holes grow teeth. And whether that's just, again, the land adapting and being like, okay, I'm going to eat, I have a hole here, I can eat something. Or if it's kind of the way that their deity is kind of helping shape the land a little bit. So I thought that was really cool. And they're over in the eater pits.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought the tainted wound, it talks about the beasts of chaos are actually residing in that particular area because they think the Gnarlwood is a burial place for an ancient mutant entity called the Soul Shrieker. So they make these sacrifices and these kind of flesh totems surrounding that particular area. And I don't know if it's to appease it or try to wake it up. They didn't really kind of go into detail about what it is they're trying to do about this flesh or, this Soul Shrieker that lives in this area.
Yeah, I tried looking up what the Soul Shrieker was, and I didn't get any hits. So it seems like it's a new thing. And normally with these like offhand little comments or stories about other factions, I just chalk it up to, all right, well, everybody gets a little quick spotlight, and then we just move on to the next thing. But I found that the Beastmen one was the only one that really highlighted a specific named thing. Like it was more specific than some of the other very generic and vague ones for the other armies. And given that we've already talked a little bit about hints that Beastmen are going to have a larger presence moving forward, especially with Season of Warthandia and how they played a role in that story. The fact that this part was specific made me think that there was more to it than this. That this was worth noting, and so I'm glad you brought it up because I noted it as well as that was particularly interesting. I wonder.
Yeah, definitely. And they do, I think people have seen, they've shared online a particular map of the region, which has got a different, few different locations kind of noted on the map, a variety of different cultures, soulbound, or not soulbound, rather soul blight, corn, they got the Skin Slow Fen, which I think the Rotmire Creed come from. But they got this place called the Great Stinkhorn, which is this mountainous mushroom where the Gits live. So they have a variety of different factions already kind of labeled to the area. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
But nothing specifically Dwarden or Elvish. So
nope, I agree.
To Dog Tire's question.
And it kind of throwing back to Dog Tired's question about the ecosystem. She did ask, what sets the Gnarlwood as being different from the surrounding countryside? And I think the things I picked up on is that after the ship crashed in this particular area, it says it destroyed everything within 100 miles of the particular, crash site. But it also, because the geomantic engines sponsored this huge growth of plant life, and for whatever reason, it seems to stimulate predatory creatures, their growth and their aggression highly. So, this particular area, the gnarlwood, the trees are aggressive. There's a huge population of predators, and they're all super aggressive, and they reproduce quickly, they heal quickly. So the whole area is very dangerous. Ghur itself is extremely dangerous, but in terms of the lore in this particular book, it talks about this area being even more so because there seems to be some sort of predatory intellect that's already kind of in the ruins, but this geomantic energy has created this extra aggressive fauna and animal life to protect it. So it's dangerous to try to get close.
I just think it's funny sometimes where we are in a realm that is chock full of things that are constantly trying to kill you. Literally every aspect of it, from the weather to the ground or whatever, is after you and trying to hunt you. And then to amp it up, if it's at a 10, to amp it up to 11 because the Illyriel's life magic has reinvigorated and frenzied the realm of beasts, so that it was bad before, but now it's even cranked up to a higher level and it's trying to kill you. But wait, that's not enough. If you go to these woods, if we were at an 11 before, we're now at a 12 because of this ship that crashed, and the magical engines are making it even more aggressive. There has to be a limit. Like there has to be a point where you can't turn it up any higher. Because every new thing that comes out seems to trying to be like, no, this is really the epitome of ferocity.
So here's what I think: you step into Ghur and you get base level, everything's trying to kill you. Then you move to the gnarlwood, and everything is trying to kill you, and those things are also trying to be killed. So it's like there's a second layer of predation, and then you move to that one spot you're talking about, and it feels to me like the island it Lost, where polar bears spring up, and you're like, what is that doing here? Like there's something there that is trying to hide something really important, and it's like making it crazy dangerous.
Yeah.
Or even if it's illusionary. But it also, just to say, there's a very clear distinction between the gnarlwood, what's in the gnarlwood, and where it's outside the gnarlwood, and that's where a lot of encampments are and people set up. So there's sort of everybody knows where it starts. It's pretty clear where the trees get bigger and meaner. And they send people in to go treasure hunt. They send people in who are disgraced to die in there. They go in after people that have died for their, cool stuff. So there's a lot of sitting on the outside, daring other people to go in.
Yeah, and I think to your point, Eric, some of the lore even mentions that, this ruin has been here for hundreds of years, and that there are beasts of chaos, war bands, and primal orcs, as they reference, that have known how dangerous the gnarlwood is, and they live in and around it, and they don't go in it. And it's only since this legend of all the treasures in the center has, grown, that we see this influx of more and more war bands coming. But, the people who've lived here, they're like, oh, no, you don't go into the gnarlwood. We know it's a bad place.
Well, I mean, I think that also gives poignant to the use of the term crusade. As we'll learn, the Sylvaneth have been here all along. This was their land before this thing crashed. The ship itself belongs to the Seraphon. They're just trying to freaking figure out how to get this stuff out. And then you got everybody else going, oh, I guess we'll go and take it for ourselves. So yeah, it's a little much.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a great. Alluding to we've danced around Talaxis for a while now. I think maybe we should spend some time unpacking that one. To that end, we've got another question from Tyriel. They've got some great ones today. What do we know about the crashing dino ship? So to that, I'll ask, hey, what do we know about the crashing dino ship with this Talaxis, the ravening ruin?
We know that it is among the Seraphon void ships. It was one of the largest, or in their largest category, because it wasn't a battleship or there to fight. It was there to go and land and create these spaces in the realm for the Seraphon to assimilate. And I forget what the term is between the Seraphon that have come to land and the ones that are staying up in the void. Do you guys remember what that's called?
So there's the coalesced are the ones that are land bound. They've coalesced into like flesh.
Yeah. So this ship is here it was created to be able to, this type of ship, to terraform a space so that some Seraphon could become coalesced Seraphon. But not only is this one of the larger ships, it also contained a lot of relics from the old ones. And so it wasn't just any old ship. It seems like it was a pretty important ship, to the point where I think even the Seraphon on the ship didn't know what all these relics did. The Slan there, most intelligent being perhaps in all of the realms, didn't know what some of these relics were. And so
it indicated that they traveled far and wide to gather these relics. So other planets, other realms, wherever, but it wasn't just from the world that was. Yeah.
And it was called the Eye of Chotek. So Talaxis? No. That's what some puffy shirted city of Sigmar human named it, but the Eye of Chotek was its original name. And there was an explosion. And I don't remember exactly what the explosion was. If they alluded, I don't think there's a lot of details around it.
I don't think we know. I think it's purposely left unknown.
It's hinted. There are lots of parts of the ruins which have this iridescent flames and Tzeentchian demons dancing around it. So there's some speculation that Tzeentch had something to do with the crash of the ship.
There you go.
Because they want the artifacts.
Or maybe they just want you to think that they had something to do with it.
Which is equally as likely, honestly.
Yeah.
So.
Never know.
But it could not stay aloft in the void, and it crashed down into Ghur, and that's its history up until it hits the ground. But then,
so it crashing then I think triggers or makes its terraforming engine go haywire, which is we've talked about why it is done what it has done to the surrounding region and to the Gnarlwood as well. And then what it essentially does is spilled open its vaults to open air such that the innards could be discovered by wayward travelers, which is sort of what we've been talking about from the Dawnbringer Crusades, and then the rumors that stemmed from that, from the discovery of Talaxis,
but not easily.
Oh no, not easily, because despite the fact that it's in some ways inoperable at this point, there are still plenty of defense mechanisms, one might call, protecting these very valuable and powerful artifacts. Although maybe no one's inherently, manning the guns, so to speak.
Right.
And so there's a fair number of traps that are, still in operation currently.
Yep.
And if just because you can navigate the Gnarlwood does not mean that you'd be able to easily navigate your way through the Eye of Chotek either.
So they use this term techno-arcane treasures. I'm going to describe one of these treasures. You tell me what from popular culture this might be.
Ooh, okay.
Forges objects from light.
The Star Trek, like when they beam you up, right? Aren't you light and then you turn into an object?
Yeah, or the replicators, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah, the replicator.
Yeah. A restorative crystalline pools.
That could be like
Fountain of Youth.
Star Wars or back to tanks. Vaults that move you from one part of the ship to a distant part of the ship.
Yeah,
teleporters. Yeah, beam me up thing.
Yeah. Let's see. Impenetrable fields of celestial energy.
Force field, baby.
There you go. And one of my favorites, dancing beads of light that can slice you in pieces.
Oh, yeah.
Lasers.
Laser fields. All right. These guys, yeah.
Did we pass?
Pretty advanced. Yeah, that was nice. Yeah. Oh, well done.
Thank you.
I like they've got wards that can blast the soul out of your body. Oh, yeah, sure. Okay.
Yeah, there's not
in the night haunt. Yeah, that's a one-way ticket to the night haunt. There you go.
But my soul belongs in my body. That's where it lives. So
they talk about trying to get through the impenetrable Nar wall around the ruins, and you're here. Guess what? It's still not safe.
I mean, this is a perfect place to run some Soulbound or to the next Silver or Hammer or what do you call it? Hero Quest.
Right.
You know, whatever. Like this is ripe for a cool old game of treasure hunting and trying to get through the traps and all that kind of stuff. It's crazy.
Yeah,
definitely.
Do you guys have any other Talaxis or Eye of Chotek or Ravening Ruin thoughts before we carry on?
I just had there was a blurb in the book, which is probably more meta in terms of what they're planning to do for the season, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But it talks about expansions and terrain sets will continue to lift the veil upon the undiscovered areas of the Gnarlwoods. So I get this vision that there's a story where we're starting in the Gnarlwoods. We're starting outside it, and we've got some quest arcs that maybe take us towards Talaxis. But as we get more and more expansions in this season of Warcry, maybe we'll get closer and closer to the ruins, and we'll get more and more pieces of the Ark ship. And maybe we'll get more traps in our games, and maybe we'll get some other sort of interesting aspects of that. So that's kind of how I envision this story progressing. I find it very exciting.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, I feel like, great terrain in the Seraphon, style, but also, like teleporters where we've already got like in Catacombs where you set up like that one object that's sort of got like a grate at the top, and you can appear there, right? Why couldn't we have, set up 2 tokens and you can move from one to the other when you step through it or something like that,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
We've talked about for a long time how they're having different, just even a piece of terrain that lets you move differently when you're within an inch of it or something like that, lots of fun that could be had.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's no reason to believe that this version of Warcry is going to be any different than the previous version of Warcry, in which we spent a fair amount of time in the Bloodwood and Spoil, right? Between the initial box, Catacombs, and then Red Harvest. Like, it was repeated, to dive deeper, sometimes literally deeper into the ground, into that space. And so I would bet money that something similar would happen here, or at the very least it ought to. So I agree.
Yeah. The only other thing I would add is that in many different places, it references essentially feral Seraphon. So, there's lots of Seraphon that remain from the crash that are protecting the site. So I'm really interested to see how that plays out, whether we get some new warbands or we'll have some chaotic beast sort of rules for Seraphon or not. That would be kind of cool to see.
It would be awesome to see Seraphon warband.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, this is a good segue then into the next thing that we got here in the outline, is that the book does take time detailing is maybe a strong word, but giving glances at every single army in the game, I'm pretty sure, and yes. what would bring them.
Could we say blurbing?
Yeah, blurbing. Yeah, just a little bit of blurbing for every army as to why or what would bring them to here, and their own version or their own impetus to come and seek out Talaxis. There's way too many for us to talk about all of them, but did you guys have any favorites that you wanted to bring up?
Well, the untamed beasts, they say, are the most apt to come to the Gnarlwood, and I would agree.
And Dark Oath Savagers, thank you.
Well, yeah, those two. But the untamed beasts were first, Josh, on the list. So it's cool because I play the Untamed Beast, and I'm like, oh, why would they leave the 8 points? But this here calls them out and says, you must leave the 8 points, son. Go west, young man.
Well, they come from Ghur.
Well, okay. But anyway, but chilling out here is they're right at home. So that's cool. So that's one I liked in Out of Chaos. Mm-hmm.
Well, I was going to say, to be the opposite, literally the downer to what you just said, the only reason they would be here, I think the only reason they were included in the book is because they are the Ghur-ish of the original, whatever. Because honestly, there's utterly no reason for them to be here whatsoever. They were already had a goal or a thing to be doing in the 8 points. They're more Planesrunner type folks in the first place. And literally the blurb at the very end details, their goals of bringing down civilization and serving Archeon. And the last line of that blurb is, and the Gnarlwood seems as good a place as any to do just that, which is the equivalent of saying no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, so I think at this point it's important to mention that the lore, as we talk about all the factions, describes reasons why they might be there to gain power for themselves, find relics, whatever else, or just to destroy everything because it represents something they don't like.
Yeah, so not all of them are winners, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. They're not all there to get treasure. They're all there to, maybe they're there just to destroy everything so nobody else gets it, or because they don't really.
So, but yeah, Josh, did you have any ones that you liked?
I'll do a throw out to the KO, just because when I was reading through the lore, it talked about how the ruins of the Ark ship could be seen through the canopy. That there's these pyramid type structures and other things all sticking up from the canopy. And I was like, well, why wouldn't you just do an aerial expedition and go find this place if you can see it from the sky? But later in the book, it talks about the geomantic energies around the ship itself create these magical storms above the region, and the KO section talks about how some of these storms could knock ships out of the sky. They fall into the jungle, and then they have to kind of preserve themselves until they fix the ships. And I thought that was kind of cool. They're looking for this aether gold that's kind of rotating and circulating above the ruins. But there's these magical geomantic storms as well, and they're trying to navigate that. And then, if they crash land, they're trying to survive. So I thought that was kind of like, oh, okay, that explains, why this isn't the easiest approach to go. So.
How'd you, Aaron?
One of my favorites, and sorry if I'm stealing one of the interesting ones.
No, go for it.
I did like the Stormcast one, actually. And so, Josh, you'd mentioned before, like they'd gotten a hold of some of the journals of the folks that had come before, and they are reading about the things that he had seen in what like tall tales or like unbelievable like miracles that he had seen in this downed relic ship. But one that caught their eye was the Starforged chambers that seemingly could bring people back from the dead. And so that caught the attention of the Sacrosanct chambers, who are already like spending a lot of time thinking about and trying to dissect like the reforging process and how they might improve it. And so if they had a chamber that could flat out bring people back to life, like maybe reforging isn't even necessary in the first place. And so that's a driving factor to get them out there to try and capture it and study it and see if they can get their hands on this, very powerful
I like that
functionality. So I thought that was a compelling one to me.
Mm-hmm. An ongoing narrative about how do we improve this process so that we're not suffering each reforging. That's kind of nice.
The Lumineth have one where they found the Ideneth found a soul chamber that was left running, and they're siphoning off Seraphon souls from it.
Yes,
found a leak.
Yeah, well, I was saying, in the pools, right? They continue to generate new Seraphon. It's like, oh, we got souls aplenty.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
Just it up, or a well of souls to just pull from regularly.
Yeah, the other one I thought was really interesting was the Soul Blight one, where it talks about, the Soul Blight are here because Nagash thinks it's important. We're going to be here, but the savagery of Ghur and the Gnarlwood drives them so close to the, unleashing their primal selves. The veneer of civility would be gone. And I thought that was an interesting struggle.
I thought that was really cool. And as I mentioned, Nagash sees Talaxis as a potential source for his resurgence. Mm-hmm. So he's sending his throng there.
Eric, you brought up the ogres before about the pits with the spikes and stuff, and how they were made for this place because they just like eating all sorts of things. Did we mention the fact that they are happy to eat the gnarl oaks themselves, which I thought was definitely.
We haven't yet.
Yeah. So the ogres are rolling up, and they're, as you might expect, the only ones that could even attempt to try and eat a gnarl oak, because gnarl oaks not made of wood, but from they seem as if they've been made like of some version of flesh or something like that. And so if it's even remotely fleshy, heck, even if it's not, ogres are willing to snack on it.
Wood.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So that is yet another reason that ogres seem to be right at home here in the Gnarlwood, which I thought was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as they break through the bark and they get to the the muscular flesh underneath. I think it was the description. Yeah, and it was a delicacy.
Heebie-jeebies.
Yeah. I think it'd be fun to in the new kit. We talked about painting them like flesh, right, or muscle and sinew and stuff. What if you cut one and instead of like rings like you'd find in a regular tree, it's just like a steak. Like the top of the steak,
blood dripping out. Yeah, right.
Like a T-bone or something.
I like picture like the cartoon version of like meat, right? And so like when you cut it, there's like the bone circle, the white circle in the middle of it.
Yep. The white fat around the edge.
Look at itself.
Gross. All right. Any other factions that you guys want to call out? There's a bunch of them. All right. So as a final question to cap off our discussion about sort of the Gnarlwoods and Talaxis and all that jazz, the setting, I suppose you could call it. We had a couple questions about casting our eyes forward, and I think we touched on a little bit this before, but we can circle back to it. Two questions. One from Iron Pit. They ask, are there any hints for future warbands in the books? And then Akarian asks, is the timeline move forward with the story of this new edition of Warcry? Both sort of looking for any hints of things that we might have seen coming down the pipe, or pike, I believe. In this part of the things that we've read thus far, did you guys get any hints or glimpses as to where you think either the story or the warbands might be headed coming up?
Well, I'll say just real quick. I think when Warcry first came out, I would have been like scoff at anyone say, "Hey, is Warcry moving the story forward?" Because I felt like it was just, "Hey, this is just a way to play in a setting." Mm-hmm. But it really felt like Warcry was moving the story along with, with the
Broken Realms, Marathi.
Yep, and what is the Realmstone, Varanite.
Mm-hmm.
Like that really came into play in this other stuff. So I'll just say is like I think there could be room for the story of Warcry over the next year to help move the story along. So it's a real thing. That being said, what do you think? What do you guys think some of those hints are?
It really depends because we know, this next year from the release, they're supposedly releasing a box set every quarter with 2 new warbands and some terrain, right? So it's like, that's a lot of new, unique units, warbands. And they do indicate, they share a map with these units or these unique factions on the map itself. So I think you can. Well, do we assume that these are perhaps some of the releases coming forward, or is there going to be something unique and surprising? Because we've had maps before, they don't correlate to what comes out next. So it'll be really interesting to see if the map proves predictive in some of the factions that we end up getting or not.
Did the map? So the map had a Nurgle icon on it, which makes you think the Rotmire, which we're going to talk about.
Yes, yeah. So the Slough, Slough of Fen is where the Rotmire Creed come from.
Was there an icon for the horns, though?
No, because they find out about Talaxis by torturing one of the Rotmire Creed. Sure. So we kind of get into that.
Were there any icons then about the what are they? The Legionnaires, the third faction coming?
No, there's nothing about that mentioned at all.
So
but with the Tainted Wound, it's like you could say, well, maybe there'll be a Beast of Chaos. The Eater Pits, maybe we'll get ogres. Canopy of Starlight, perhaps we'll get some Cities of Sigmar. They talk about the large mushroom there. Maybe we'll get some Spider Fang. Because they talk about it being inhabited by spiders and webs, and so there's lots of potential based on what they've mentioned on the map. But
that's all well and good, but I think I know exactly what's going to happen.
Oh man, excellent. I can't. Just tell us. Go ahead and tell us right now.
So here's what's up. To this point, the Seraphon haven't had much of a beef with the regular gods, right? The gods of order, chaos, whatever. Like they've had a beef, but they're sort of enacting their own plans. They're staying up in the void ships, etc. The fact that one of their best void ships got taken down, even if it was like back in history, like time doesn't really matter that much. We're getting to know about it now, so it's important. Right. And B, like everyone's going to come in, like they're trying to recover this stuff. The Seraphon are trying to get back their stuff. And now that like the Pantheon's going to come in and try and take their things, and Nagash is going to try and take their things, I think it's going to be, and then Nagash is throwing the realms out of whack. Alariel's throwing the realms out of whack. I think the gods are playing on too big of a level that the Seraphon are going to need to step in and like put some people in some corners. And so I think we're going to see something out of this where the Seraphon like step up and into the business and take some action.
That'd be cool. It does say that Lord Croak has been sending warbands there to try to figure out what happened and retrieve artifacts.
Yeah, it's their stuff. And the Sylvaneth, the Sylvaneth are there. They were hit pretty hard by that there.
Yeah, they lost lots of generations of people apparently. But
I want you guys to take this as the compliment that I intended. But both of you had, in your own ways, your own version of hashtag Paul theories. And if he couldn't be here with us, at least he's here in spirit. I would say.
He did share lots of theories with us.
He sure did.
We should read all those for the listeners.
I will not. They are my private treasures, my private Paul theories, worth their weight in gold.
We'll just share one that he thought maybe the Eye of Chotek was from the world that was. Perhaps it was a temple that came from the world that was.
And I think that's probably true, actually.
And that it was Lord Croak's ship.
Okay. So furthermore interesting. In trying to think where, if there were, I don't believe there are any explicit hints as to future direction of the story per se, other than what Josh was talking about before, and that like we'll probably spend a bit more time here, and so I imagine there'll be more interesting things to spring up from Talaxis in the Gnarlwood. So I think that's almost a sure thing. But as far as what the warbands are going to be, my money is there's probably just going to be more different variations of the Chaos warbands is what my guess is. And 3 so far have been just that, which of course we don't get.
I'm hoping we'll get non-Chaos warbands as a decent mix.
In some ways, I agree with you, but like at this point, it's been so overwhelmingly chaos. I'd almost prefer to just stick with it then. At this point, like if there was going to be like an equal mix of that sort of stuff, then I would be down for it. But like, what is there?
Well, but we're
10
out
to
of the
1 or
8
something
now. So in the 8 points, it made sense that it was primarily chaos.
Well,
here we're in Ghur, right? So there's lots of different factions in play. It makes sense to introduce some unique.
I think they've done a good job of like. With the Lumineth, when the Lumineth came out, they came out with like a Warcry box for it. I think that was a good move, and I think we'll see more of that.
Yeah, true. All right, any final thoughts about the setting, the larger story before we shift gears entirely and talk about some of these new warbands? I guess that's a pretty good segue. But is there any other thoughts you guys want to get out before we transition?
No, let's go to the warbands.
Yeah, that was an accident, but that's a good way to switch. All right, so listeners, you may or may not know, but with this new box set, there comes out 2 new Warcry warbands: the Horns of Hashut and the Rottenmeier Creed. Well, hey, if we're going to talk about the Horns of Hashut, let's start with a listener question from a Carrion. They ask, do the Horns of Hashut lore hint of any information toward the return of the Chaos Dwarfs? And you'll say, well, Return of the Chaos Dwarfs, what does that mean? What are you talking about, Carrion? We're here to talk about it right now. I heard a resounding yes. Why do you say yes? And what is the connection between the Horns and Chaos Dwarden?
There's several different references to the Horns of Hashut. Mortals being under the wrath of the Chaos Dwarden and have no mercy, and that they're here to turn everything into desert and desolation, so that the industrial demonic engines of the Chaos Dwarden can be built upon these, and that they're running out of time because the Chaos Dwarden are coming to Thondia because Hashut has declared this area to be under attack and of vital interest.
Yeah.
And they go on to talk about the Hashut, the father of darkness, and his true nature and origins are a mystery, except they say a mystery to all but his most loyal prophets. Then they allude to him. Yeah, is he a true god at all, or is he just a demonic abomination? Perhaps he came from the world that was. So it's kind of interesting that they kind of allude.
Maybe it's Be'lakor messing around with
right.
It was
the ancient demon prince, or what? But it says whatever the truth, Hashut's power is unquestionably on the rise.
I wrote that quote down. In fact,
right.
that there's nothing. It's literally the word unquestionably is in there. There's nothing vague or uncertain about that. Like
exactly.
Hashut is on the rise, and so when
it's
the question
on the rise.
Yeah. So the question being, is this a hint to any information towards the return of the Chaos Dwarfs? I mean, I can't read this as any other way as yes, they're definitively coming. And if they end up not coming, this was a lie. It's not. It wasn't. We weren't misinterpreting it. I think they must be.
It's just weird to me that I get that they have like human like representatives, I guess, or like underlings. It just doesn't make sense. Why would you?
Really?
Yeah, but why wouldn't you just make these guys the Chaos Dwarf?
Because these are expendable.
Yeah, but
they're fun. Humans, so they're expendable.
Less fun than a Chaos Dwarf warband, but.
Although that is the explanation they would give, Josh, and so you're right in that regard, but that's like a 1 degree separation. Like it's a thing that needs to be justified, whereas you could just cut out the justification entirely and just make them Dwarden. But that's not the way they went. But I mean, you're getting at the point. So the question on the table then could be who are these folks then? And that is what they are. They are these expendable vanguard forces of the Dwarden worshippers of the Dark God,
the Father of Darkness. Yeah.
So they go out ahead of the slow. I forget the word they use, but like the slow and plodding march of the Chaos Dwarden, and they go prepare the way essentially, and they clear cut. Demolish, pulverize is a word they use, landscapes into this desolate wasteland so that different factories and infernal engines can be set up and it prepared for the dark industry of these Chaos Dwarden. I'd missed the second part of the Carrion's question, actually, because they also had asked, is Heshut described as a representation of a major chaos god, like what we've seen with some of the other chaos Warcry factions, or is it a thing of its own? I think it's pretty clear that it's a thing of its own, though it's up for debate what that thing is my interpretation of it.
Yep. Is it a demon? Is it an actual god? Is it something else? Yeah, and I think that's up for debate still. Yeah,
Agreed.
I was going to say, I do think it all suggests that we'll actually get, Chaos Dwarden in the next year or so.
Yeah, I won't put a timeline on it, but I definitely think they're coming because it's both this talking about like the worshippers of Heshut, but there's also all the Dwarden talk in some of the other books, just talking about how they are aware of like the rise of some like chaotic brethren of theirs, and like the fact that even the KO and the Fire Slayers are starting to join forces more and more seems like it's a storytelling beat to prep for like having a combined front to fight off against a common enemy, which I imagine would be this Chaos Dwarden is my guess where that story is going.
They talk about how they're on the way and Thondia is their target. So if AOS is hanging out in Ghur for a while, that suggests that okay, if we're going to be here for the next year or two, the Chaos Dwarden are going to be here with us at some point.
Yeah,
because they're coming to Thondia.
That's true, and they did call that out as like Thondia is a target of theirs, and like if these ages in real life lasts, at most 2 or so years, then so maybe your prediction isn't too far off. Actually, that's a good point. And actually, talking about places, they're coming to Thondia, but I wanted to ask this question about these two warbands. Where do they come from? Where do the Horns of Heshut come from? I don't know that it spends any time talking about that, really.
Not really.
Yeah, so I wish I knew, but maybe now's not the time to talk about it because
they're definitely coming from a desert waste full of machines, right?
Yeah, of their own making. We can't say
they made the desert.
Yeah, but they probably created it.
Yep. Yeah. They talk about their masters conquering different empires in the moment, but it doesn't really say where.
Mm-hmm. Wherever the camera isn't, basically.
It's a lot of talk.
I totally have an army somewhere else conquering all sorts of fortune, but they live in Canada though. So
you say that all the time. We don't believe you.
They have passports. Watch out.
my girlfriend's with them too, but she's from Canada. That's why you've never met her. All right, so a question for you guys then is. I know there's not too many, different units in these warbands, but there's some. Were any of them your favorite? Did any of them jump out at you that you wanted to talk about in the Horns of Heshut range?
Good question. I always look to the smallest unit first to be like, okay, what are the peons about? And these guys kind of have like almost like a a cloak around their shoulders, which is kind of cool. So it's, a little bit of, mostly fabric and leathers and that sort of thing, and a little bit of metal. But they do look like they have like implements for tearing down trees or, plowing fields or, that sort of stuff. So they do seem like they're here to just wreck stuff. So that's pretty cool. But just so I can get it before Josh does, there's a demolisher with a flame hurler. Basically, I don't know, a bag full of hot lava,
pipe of flame,
and a pipe that comes out, and they just squeeze it with their arm, and hot magma. So that's really cool. That's a new kind of thing for Warcry.
Yeah, definitely interesting. And just to add to that, what Eric was touching on is some of those the grunts of this particular warband. I've heard a variety of people mention that they look like the farmers of Age of Sigmar. They've got the real down to earth tools and clothing of somebody you could just use to represent, like, these are the normal people in AOS, and they just got kind of roped into this sort of situation by their slave overlords. So it's really interesting.
Yeah. So those are called the Shatterers, and so those implements aren't tools of construction, but are tools of destruction. Even though one looks like a hoe, still. So I was going to talk about the Shatterers too. So instead, I'll talk about the the rest of the range. So there's the mooks down below, but everyone else has these bull helmets ranged so from the Ruinators and the Demolishers and I guess the Ruinator alphas. And so all of them are wearing the bull helmets, which they had to craft themselves, which is
the Hashatar.
Yeah, there you go. So it's noteworthy in that, like, their jobs are for the most part to destroy and not create, but they do create these helmets, and they're put on their heads while they're scalding hot, and obviously, to put it mildly, it burns their face, and many don't survive the donning of these helmets. But if you do, you're imbued with like magical power because they're also blessed and
powerful artifacts.
Yeah, and they give you super strength amongst a bunch of other stuff, so you can literally use them to like headbutt stuff. So all across that range, it's all pretty impressive. And then I guess essentially that's I think what ties a lot of the warband, the rest of the warband together, and has sort of that unified view, which I really dig.
Yep. A lot of horns on their back.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, do you guys have any other Horns of Hashut thoughts before we move on to the next one?
No,
I touched on it at all.
Because here we go. Now we can talk about the Rotmire Creed. So they are at odds against the Horns of Hashut, but guys, who are they? How would you sum up this warband in terms of description? Who are we talking about?
These guys are touched by Nurgle all over the place, and they are rotting and sores and blisters, but they don't seem to make that connection. So it's some of the war bands in Warcry worship kind of shadows of the main gods, whereas these guys seem to be touched pretty directly by Nurgle, but they don't call them that,
Call them the Lord of Leeches.
Lord of Leeches. And they're crazy alchemists. So they have different concoctions, and they deal in different ways to transfer those concoctions, from blow darts to needles to putting the stuff on their blades. So they're here to spread this stuff knowingly. That's who they are. They live in the marsh. They're one with the marsh. They are, probably have all of those parasites living in them, and they just want to share.
Yeah, so generous, those guys. Well, in some ways, actually, historically, they are very generous. And talking about the marsh, Eric, then it leads me to my next question is, where do they come from, in fact? Who's got thoughts on that?
I can touch on that. So they come from a region kind of north of the Gnarlwood, the Skinslaw Fen, which kind of progresses a little bit further south. So the Rotmire Creed were originally doctors, essentially, in Excelsis, and
Doctors
they were
Without
working.
Borders?
Yeah, right. Working on this filter of immortality, they were trying to find a cure for all diseases to help people live forever. And Nurgle was offended, so he slowly began to corrupt them, and they and kind of twist their efforts. And so they slowly began to test on unwilling subjects more and more. And when they were discovered, they were run out of Excelsis and into the swamps. And Stormcast pursued them until too many of them died, and then they stopped. And so they began to refine their theology within the swamps and worship the Lord of Leeches in different ways, and kind of develop this elixir of putrefaction, which they think will lead them to immortality. But their leaders, the Wither Lords, will contain all the knowledge themselves, and they'll experiment on the others before they experiment on themselves. And so they wear these stilts to stay out of the disgusting filter of putrefaction that comes out of these corpse totems they develop. So they don't become infested before they want to. So it's kind of an interesting dichotomy of situations where, yes, we worship this and we're trying to purify ourselves and elevate ourselves, but I'm going to test it on you first, and I will test it on myself.
That was pretty delightful. And so what brings them here, I suppose, is so they've been in the Rotmere, kicking it, lording over the marshes and perfecting their concoctions, when an expedition of folks coming out of Excelsis led their caravan into the Rotmere, and then they get ambushed by the Rotmire Creed, and they were destroyed, eliminated. But then the prophecy shards that they had gotten from this shard of malice from Excelsis remained, and their priests or their seers got a hold of those prophecy stones and started actually interpreting the prophecies. And what they saw was that they saw essentially the Gnarlwood with, although they didn't know it at the time, they saw the terraforming effects of Talaxis down there. And they took that view or that prophecy as they interpreted as a missive from their god, from their leech or Lord Leech. And they interpreted it as it was something that they needed to go down and corrupt and take control over and bring in this utopia for their god, which is, very quintessentially a Nurgle thing to do, right? That's essentially all the followers of Nurgle are doing. So it's one of those, they were given a quest, a standard quest from Nurgle that they didn't realize that it was, they weren't the first to hear something like this. So what do? They head on down. They try to breach or make a headway into the Gnarlwood. It's not as easy as it sounds, but they're doing their best. And of course, while they're in the midst of the woods, they butt heads up against the Horns of Hashut, who have been sent to these woods and in an attempt to terraform it itself, right? So that they themselves were trying to clear cut the forest, whereas the Rotmire Creed were there to sort of corrupt it, each making an attempt to make it more desirable for their forces and for their cultures and for their gods.
Mm-hmm. Water versus fire, as they kind of highlight in the book.
Yeah, essentially, it's a great yin and yang sort of balancing of elements for sure. It's around this time where they are obviously different. They're aggressive towards each other. They're fighting battles left and right, and eventually the Horns of Hashut capture one of the Rotmire Creed dudes and get torture out of him the fact that they know of this terraforming geomagic magic from Talaxis, and the Horns, who up until this point weren't making much headway in sort of clear cutting this forest, realized, well, maybe this is a tool that we could use instead. And so now both of these warbands have the same target. They both have the same goal, is to get control of this power so that they can not through magical means change the landscape in the way that they desire.
Yeah, associated to this, I thought it was funny from both sides to talk about stories about trying to corrupt or destroy the gnarl oaks, but they just move out of the way, and they're like, oh my god, we can't take care of these things. And the ones we do kill, they're replaced by the ones that are still living. So so I think from both sides it was really funny to kind of see that, oh no, the gnarl oaks, they get up and move and then they'll come back later, or they're just more of them keep coming, so that you're always stuck in the same situation.
They make like a tree and leave.
Oh, literally make like a tree and eat you
and leave in you. you.
It's true. I thought it was interesting that their god that they call Lord Leech in the book. I think Leech. I'm like, well, where do I hear Leech in Age of Sigmar? And what do you think of? You think of Festus the Leech Lord. So we've got Lord Leech, and there's Festus the Leech Lord. And I'm like, well, I mean, obviously he's a Nurgle follower. This is all Nurgle like wrapped up, but like, is he specifically having some play in this? I mean, like on behalf of Nurgle in some way? I'm not sure. I'd be interested to know if this was an intentional connection to this individual character, or is it all leeches all the time with Nurgle? I guess I don't know.
Yeah, it sounds like they were building flesh totems in the shape of a greater demon of Nurgle.
Yeah, true.
So, but yeah, it could be.
I think it'd be cool to like have. I mean, like some of these where like, the Mortarks have their followers, right?
Right.
So if we're to have Nurgle have some, lower level things that kind of start to worship him, I think, so these could be Festus's, followers, people he's been feeding lies to, or maybe that was his project to turn their research against them, so
yeah,
that'd be cool.
And they talk about, how the Rotmire Creed are all like alchemists and apothecaries and stuff. And he himself, Festus, was an apothecary, and he, bore the respective physicians and alchemists and scientists previously, but now he, concocts diseases. Just, I mean, 1-to-1 comparison to the Rotmire Creed.
Good correlation, man.
Yeah.
Good
so
correlation.
I wonder. Well, maybe more to come. We talk about what might come in the future. Maybe this is some sort of connection that might materialize. I'll ask you guys, do you have a favorite unit out of this whole bunch that you want to chat about?
I kind of like the Witherlord. The concept is interesting, and he's got this big syringe which he goes around injecting people with pestilence. This is kind of cool. It's like, come here, I got all these diseases for you. Stick it. No, good luck.
Yeah. No, it's really cool, and that helmet's really cool.
Yeah, I'm gonna say
exactly.
He's the most unique. So like his helmet's made out of reeds, which is cool. He's the most unique looking dude, I think, out of this war. I mean, they're all pretty unique, but like he's really stands out and really quintessentially like sums up the summons of
it's the stilts
warband. Yeah, absolutely. It stands out. Okay, I get it.
Stands heads above the rest.
The bloated ones are interesting too, because they're kind of semi-worshipped by the rest of the warband. Hey. Sorry.
You back off. Bloated ones are cool.
Yeah.
Because they're semi-worshipped by the rest. Dang it. Well, what's cool about their aesthetic is they've got these kind of like gauntlets with claws on them. So they're kind of little Wolverines running through the swamp and coming up and just slashing and stabbing you. So that's a really cool take on these as well, where they've got sort of these bones and spurs as part of their weaponry, whereas everyone else is sort of like makeshift, sticks with claws at the end and that sort of thing, where they've kind of hammered them together. There's more shields with these guys too, which is interesting. It helps them make them a little bit tougher. So, but yeah, the bloated ones, they look pretty mean. A little Wolverine energy there.
Yeah. I like. So I really dig the stilts aspect of it, and so like the Witherlord has those, but then also the Carrion Catchers do too. So any of them that have the stilts, I think, are super interesting. However, the story behind the Carrion Catchers is fine. It's just that they're the ones who go out and essentially like harvest flesh in any real form that they can find it in, whether it's beast or humanoid or what have you, and use that flesh to make it's what gets made into the totems and what gets thrown into the pools that they end up getting corrupted through their diseases. Yeah, which is pretty gnarly.
Natural.
Yeah. I wasn't big on the stilts until I kind of read the lore behind it. I was like, oh, the stilts are there not to necessarily stay out of the swamp, but to stay out of the pools of putrefaction that they're throwing these things into. And I was like, oh, that's a whole different take on it.
Yeah, for sure. And then I guess not to talk about all of them, but too late. We already started. The Mirefolk outcasts are their lower level, like the smaller dudes, but they're interesting because they are continuously sort of being driven out of like civilization because they've got these like physical deformations, and in doing so, which is a sign that they're corrupted in some way. And so, in some ways, to prove the point, they then leave and take to the marshes and then go try to join up with the Rotmire Creed so that they can develop poisons and diseases and stuff to like turn them around on the people that drove them away. Which
sort of like those leprosy communities where they get driven out from their homes and then they have to live together and support each other. Only these guys kill others.
Just they take it one step farther. But all the models in this range, with the exception of the Witherlord, still show signs of like plague from presumably Nurgle, or what they call the Leech, Lord Leech. But the Witherlord, like we had mentioned before, is the one that doesn't seem corrupted in any real physical way anyways.
Yeah.
Must be nice.
Some bumps on his belly. Maybe some boils. Or maybe it's hidden.
Or maybe it's internal corruption, internal festeringness.
Yeah, of the spirit.
Yeah, of the soul. That might cover the Rotmire Creed, unless you guys got anything else you want to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, between the two, I think I like the Rotmire Creed a little bit better. I think the aesthetic is a little different. Keeps them in the marshes and that sort of stuff, which, we haven't seen as much of that.
More of an ambush mentality than,
I think I like the range of the Rotmire Creed better, but I think the story of the horns is maybe more important, or like more noteworthy, personally.
Yep.
All right, cool. Well, then with that being said, I'll ask if you guys have any other just general points of interest. I know Josh was saying he had a lot of notes to pull from. Were there any other topics that we didn't cover that you wanted to bring up and highlight?
I guess one thing is just with the huge list of different animals and plants and creatures that they list in here, it would be really cool to get some additional wandering monsters or something in one of these box sets that they're coming out with. Obviously feral Seraphon would be is definitely going to be an option, I'm sure. But by getting some of these other unique types of creatures to have wandering through your games would be a blast.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to have some skinks and other things as in rather than what is it? The chaos chickens and the
Furies
and Furies.
Yep.
Yeah, getting some like 6-legged beasts and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm surprised they didn't, actually, considering they'd already set the precedent. I'm surprised they did, especially if it's a new edition. I would have thought that maybe there would have been more wandering stuff, but
we will see.
Can't win them all. Yeah. Any other points of interest that we haven't talked about yet?
I guess just reiterating, that this some of the rules here are different, and some of the way campaigns work in the Gnarlwoods are a little bit different than they worked in the 8 points, and so I think that'll be a fun thing to embrace. Like spending time in either spot, and there's, I like the idea that we're moving to different locations and experiencing them differently.
Yeah, me too. All right. Well, in that case, I'm going to transition to just one or two more listener questions that we haven't covered up above. Another one from Macarian. They ask, would you more likely live in the Gnarlwood or in the Bloodwind Spoil? And I'll phrase it in a different way. Would you rather live in the Gnarlwood or the Bloodwind Spoil? If you had to pick, which one would you live in?
It seems like the Bloodwind Spoil is easier to survive in.
Maybe.
There's more people there. Maybe. But there's also I'm wondering if there's something that you have to, in order to survive there, you have to become corrupted by chaos. So maybe Gnarlwood's a more honorable place to live.
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
What do you think, Josh?
You live off the land and fend for yourself, even though
the land lives off of you.
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah, I think I would choose the Gnarlwood over the Bloodwind Spoil myself.
Oh man, I think I'd pick the Bloodwind Spoil because at least I could go to bed. Like at least I'd be able to sleep there.
That's true.
I don't know that I'd ever be able to sleep in the Gnarlwood personally.
Not sleep in the Gnarlwood, right?
But sleep is important.
But that's food to think on. Food for thought, I'm sorry, is actually how you say that. Food for thought.
Food for the trees.
All right, yeah. All right, so I think that brings us towards the end. The final thing we'll talk about then is we'll give a little review. We'll give a little highlight. What did you think of the story? And I'm going to couch it in this question from Mealhern, which is to say, are the Warband Tome, which is to say the Rotten Ruin book, and the core book, are they worth buying for the fluff alone? So tell me what you thought about the books, but then also tell me, are they worth getting if you only wanted the lore?
Well, I think, just going from a more logistical, practical perspective, I think eventually you'll be able to get the core rulebook by itself. I don't think you'll be able to get the Rotten Ruin book without buying the box set. So if you are interested in the lore of why we're in the Gnarlwood, why all the factions in the Gnarlwood, the core rulebook covers that in detail and is definitely going to be a worthwhile purchase. If you're playing either one of these new war bands, definitely get the box set for the Rotten Ruin additionally, because it has a lot of some interesting, unique takes on each warband, as well as unique quests and campaign arcs for those particular warbands.
I echo that.
Yeah. I mean, that is the correct answer, I believe. I mean, it's a subjective question, but yet that is the correct objective answer to that. So then I'll say, keep going. What did you think of the two books that we read from a lore perspective?
I enjoyed them both. Yeah, I think the core rulebook added. I think it was really nice that it added a lot of information around why each particular faction was going to be interested in the Gnarlwood. I think that, because a lot of people are like, why would my warband leave the A points to go to this random place? So it did a great job describing that. And I think that was well done. I think the additional lore they had in the Rotten Ruin book for the other war bands was very interesting and added a little bit more depth to those particular war bands and their particular rivalry and their quests and the particular campaign arcs they have. I think are a lot of fun.
Yeah. Hey, Eric, what did you think of this here of these pair of books that we read from a lore perspective? Give me a little review.
Yeah, I think I really enjoyed that. They gave us a background on the setting. They dug us in deep. They blurbed us like crazy. So we got a lot of little things to play off and think of. And I actually like that better for, at least for a period of time, having some of these things unanswered so we can make them up and let our imaginations run wild. But I also really appreciated that they gave some voice to how any of the factions might what motivations they might have here. And they did that in some of the Tomo champions as well, when they brought in, some of the other warbands from AOS into the 8 points, right? It gave a little bit of life. It gave us purpose. It gave us a motivation. And I really enjoyed that. So I had fun with the book. I think the core book, especially with all the other stuff that it has, is going to be a must buy for Warcry. But I think the lore is definitely worth it. It doesn't take long to read. It's chock full of interesting things and very rewarding.
Excellent. I might amend my initial sort of unanimous echoing of Josh's assumption that the core book would be worth buying, maybe for just the lore itself. And you didn't explicitly say that, but if the question on the table is the core book worth buying for just the lore, if you were never going to play that game, is it still worth getting the book? And maybe I don't know that that's true. Maybe it's not. I don't know that it is necessarily worth getting if you were never going to. I mean, it's if you're going to play the game at all, it's a necessity. But like, if you were never going to roll a dice, would you need it? I don't know. Probably not. Actually, I don't know that it gives you.
Probably not, especially if you listen to our podcast.
Yeah, especially if you just listen to literally all the things we just told you. Then we just saved you however many bucks the book cost. Sorry, I'm just kidding, GW. I'm just joking.
Well, I think we've always covered the lore, because sometimes when people are playing the games, they only focus on the rules.
Right.
So we want to make sure that, that they have another way of hearing all that stuff, so that when they play the games, they have more depth to their games.
Providing a valuable service. Absolutely. And as far as my review goes, oh man, I'm kind of going to be the dissenting voice a little bit, in that I think the problem with this is that I'm comparing this new setting and the new story and the new, environment that we find ourselves. I compare it to the Warcry that came before, and the Warcry that came before was, in my mind, so picture perfect that it was almost impossible that this version was going to live up to it. And so I know sometimes I suffer from not wanting to see change, or I don't want to see patterns broken, but this breaks every pattern. We have been breaking every pattern in Warcry, and every time they do it, it kills me a little bit. And that I loved the version of all the war bands coming from different realms. What a great balance. What a great picture that they painted there. What a great setup that they had. I love having it being in the Bloodwind Spoil. I love being in the 8 points, not because I cared about that setting per se, but it served as such an opportunity to get a glimpse of a place, but then had limitless potential to go such weird, wild directions. Like we were saying before, that we had only explored one piece of the pie, but there were so many pies left. And to that I would ask, well, so I understand having new environments and it gives opportunity for new terrain and to be in new places, but like a forest full of trees that eat you, that could be and it definitively is in the 8 points. We've read stories about those same types of forest eating people. Like that is a quintessential 8 points type thing. We didn't need to leave to go to Ghur to do that. It could have still been in the 8 points and still serving that ongoing story. And so I know a lot of people were excited that we left 8 points and we were going to different places. I don't know that I was personally one of them. I thought there were still an infinite number of stories that could be told there, especially because so much of Warcry is couched in that chaos like setting. And so I can't blame them for moving. I understand why they did it, right? Because the camera's on Ghur in every other aspect, essentially, right? From just the way the stories are going and all these books that are coming out. They want to have a unified front. I understand why the product makes sense for sure. But I wish they didn't have to. I wish they could have kept doing the thing that they were doing so very well before. And so it just feels like a step down, which bums me out to some degree. If this book was taken by itself, or like these stories were taken by itself, where I knew that we were always jumping from realm to realm to realm and interesting places in those realms, I would probably care less, or it wouldn't bother me as much. It's just, it had such a strong start, and it seemed like a very clear direction going forward. And they zigged when I didn't expect a zig or a zag. But hey, that's what GW does. They keep you on your toes. The only pattern they have is that there are no dang patterns. So I need to learn that.
Well, hopefully, one of the things they did really well coming out of the first launch of Warcry is they had some short stories that we really enjoyed. So maybe we'll see some of those soon.
And that could very well help as well. So I hope to find more. If we're gonna be spending time here for a prolonged period of time, at least give me the stories for it. Lord knows I'm not going to make my own. How absurd is that? But just the final thought, though, is, however, if I could take this on its own without the context of the other Warcry, it's definitely good enough, especially for this supplemental game. I think it gave me plenty of things to chew on. It was never going to be earth shaking. It was never going to be, groundbreaking. But it's enough to get a glimpse of this small subset of a region that we just recently learned about. And so I'm happy to keep learning about, the weird and varied places of Thondia now. So it's definitely a supplement to, or supplemental to that Seasons of War Thondia book that we had just recently read. So, I mean, that's cool. I like that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like we'll keep getting more pieces of the puzzles over the next season.
Probably. And I like collecting pieces of puzzles, that's for sure. Honestly, that's just how puzzles work. You don't need to collect them, Aaron. They just come like all together. Have you ever done a puzzle before? Anyways, I'll leave it at that. Do you guys have any other final thoughts, or we can just close her out?
I was going to say, just in that quick Cliff's notes, I'm a little embarrassed for Nagash that it took him all through like the Age of Myth and Age of Chaos to come up with a big plan and big magic to affect the realms, and Ilaria just decided one day to do it when she got fed up.
That's such a good point that we've never talked about, but you're absolutely correct.
It lasted a while, though.
She's like, that's enough of this.
just waves her hand and it's done. Like it just happens. Oh, you're right. Oh God. Sometimes you need an outsider's perspective. Not you're an outsider, but like you need fresh eyes on stuff like this to talk about it. That's a good point. Josh, you had a thing you were going to say.
I was just going to say that I think, to your point about leaving the 8 points and, there's so much unexplored potential there. I agree. There's so much I still want to learn about the 8 points. And I think a lot of people are on the fence because, they say, okay, now we know that Warcry will exist outside of just the 8 points. That's awesome. But what does that mean? So I think a lot of people are hoping to see war bands that are not chaos centric. Unique war bands like, the Shadow Stalkers, from different factions. And so hopefully we'll see that and they kind of like say, oh yeah, we can continue to play in this space. And yes, while we're still exploring the unique ways that chaos pervades, the realms, we can also introduce some unique factions from normal factions and introduce them into Warcry like we haven't done in other systems yet. So I'm hoping we'll have that opportunity.
Sure, I bet. And honestly, I bet they will. The fact that they broke the seal with the Shadow Stalkers, I think, shows that they're willing and able. So I don't doubt that we'll see more. Cool. I'm going to close her out unless someone stops me. It's time for our reforging. The Sigmar Willing will be back soon. Like, subscribe, share, or leave a review. Join us on Discord, drop a tip on our Patreon. Anything you can do will spread the word of Sigmar farther than we can on our own. Chat with us anytime about your thoughts on Twitter at The Mortal Realms. And Eric, where can they find you online?
They can find me at themortalrealms.com/Discord.
Excellent. Josh, where can they find you online?
Yeah, I'm also in the Discord quite a bit. You can also hit me at J.E. Arrington, but also Eric and I are also at Dogs of Warcry and at dogsofwarcry@gmail.com.
Perfect. And I'm Aaron. You can find me at Dos Asos on Twitter, and you can find all our Mortal Realms shows and content at www.themortalrealms.com. The end.